Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful conference. Throughout the past AMS symposiums on societal impacts, we have gained insights on how to communicate risk information to the general public. However, one specific group that continues to grow in number has been left out of this conversation, and that is Spanish speakers here in the United States. Until we create effective risk communication in the Spanish language, these communities will continue to be disproportionately affected from natural disasters. Today, I'm going to be highlighting some of the challenges we face when translating weather information from English to Spanish by showcasing how meteorologists currently translate SPC risk categories. In addition, I'm going to propose a framework on how to approach this problem going on into the future. Special appreciation to all my colleagues involved in this project, and if you're interested in learning more about it, it was recently published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, and you can find the DOI there on your screen. Without further ado, let's begin. Nearly 1 in every 5 Americans present day speak Spanish, and when we zoom out and compare this to the rest of the world, the USA ranks number 4 in terms of Spanish speakers. This number is only expected to grow. Instituto Cervantes 2019 predicts that by 2060, there will be 119 million Hispanohablantes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is nearly 1 in every 3 Americans that will be able to speak Spanish. In order to create effective risk communication, though, we have to overcome several obstacles, and those are the ones listed there on your screen. Today, we will focus a lot on number 3, translating risk terminology. But I do want to make sure I review numbers 1 and 2 so that we are all on the same page going forward here. So let's start off with risk literacy. The United States Census defines a Hispanic or Latino as someone that comes from Latin America or Spain. With all due respect, this is definitely a lot more complicated than it sounds because there are various countries that make up Latin America, different cultures, different backgrounds, and of course, different climates. In Lima, Peru, for example, our main threat that we must endure are earthquakes, whereas in other parts of Latin America, like Yabucoa, Puerto Rico, they experience hurricanes year-round. Go down a little bit south to Córdoba, Argentina, they experience thunderstorms. As a matter of fact, they just broke a record for gargantuan hail. But my point here is that with all of these different climates in Latin America, they're all not used to the threats that we experience here in the United States, like tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, lightning, hurricanes, and things of that sort. And though we might be able to translate something from English to Spanish, the implication of the word is not quite yet set in stone for these people, since 1, they have never experienced this hazard altogether, and 2, their culture hasn't really taught them about it and best ways to prepare. And so that's what I mean by risk literacy. The second challenge involves Spanish dialects, or the varieties of the Spanish language in general. And what best way to illustrate this than imagining yourself setting up a socially distant picnic with a friend. And you want to say, hey friend, how's it going? In English, you can get away with just saying the word friend because everyone understands what that means. But in Spanish, you have to be a little bit careful because depending on where you're from or your socioeconomic status or other factors, the word evolves. In Mexico, for example, friend is compa. Costa Rica, they say mae. España dice tío. Peruvians use causa or pata. And so don't get me wrong, our language is beautiful and it is very diverse, and it should stay that way. However, when we try to communicate risk, our goal is to make sure that everybody understands all of the information at hand so that they can make life-saving decisions. And language barriers should never get in the way of doing that. So let's apply this into a meteorological scenario to showcase how this might be a problem. Say a thunderstorm is imminent and coming your direction in the picnic you just had, and you want to tell your friend that a thunderstorm is on its way. Well, in Spanish, it's not as simple as just saying the word thunderstorm. Again, depending on where you're from or how you were raised, the word evolves. Here in the United States, we mainly use the word tormenta, and it is known to be the most universal way of saying it as everyone understands what that means. But there are regional varieties of the word we must consider when communicating this type of information to Spanish speakers. Let's also consider risk communication here. And what best way to illustrate the problem at hand than by showing you how our agencies go about translating tornado watch and warning information present day. The National Weather Service defines tornado watch as vigilancia de tornados. And you don't have to know Spanish to realize that the FEMA definition, amenaza de tornado, is very different. Same thing for tornado warning. National Weather Service uses aviso, while FEMA uses the word advertencia. It's not that these words are just different. Each one of them recommend different sorts of actions to take, and depending on where you're from or how you were raised, you might interpret these words very differently. And so this is what I mean by our biggest challenge here, that there's currently no consensus between bilingual meteorologists when it comes towards translating risk terminology because of these varieties of the Spanish language. Now, I didn't mention technical terminology because it's not that much of an uphill battle, and let me explain why here. A parallel field to ours, the medical field has to do a lot of the things that we do. They have to also encourage people to take action, like taking their medications, and also communicate jargon like medicines and all of this fancy vocabulary out there, just as meteorologists do. But they've actually invested in making sure there are translation resources available and making sure there are frameworks that are established so they know how to translate going forward. And what they recommend is that in terms of professional terminology, like medical jargon, or in meteorology, words like thunderstorm, shear, correlation coefficient, that the organization comes into agreement with a certain word and go on an educational campaign. Now, this is important because communities themselves don't use these words on a daily basis. So you can get away with just teaching them one specific word that we all agree on and just educating them so that word is now the norm. However, when it comes towards risk terminology, we have to be a little bit more careful than that, because health isn't the only place where people run into risk-related words. They do so in meteorology. They do so by reading the back of a bleach bottle. And so that's where cultural differences and those dialects that I speak of really get in the way of translation efforts. And this is where medical experts bring in language experts so that we can adapt the words to fit the community's cultural lenses and create unifying risk communications. Because there are words out there that all Latin American countries and, for example, Spain can understand. And to showcase this problem on how it's currently being handled in the weather enterprise, I wanted to show you a case study on how bilingual meteorologists are currently translating SPC risk categories. If you go to the website, you can find the words in English, of course, and we've covered them intensely throughout this conference: marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, and high. You can also find Spanish language definitions on the website: mínimo, leve, elevado, moderado, and alto. Now, the National Weather Service has done a phenomenal job in creating initiatives to expand Spanish language resources. And you can actually access an English to Spanish dictionary through public domain. They went ahead and translated the SPC risk categories from English and found marginal, leve, aumentado, realzado, moderado, and alto. You don't have to know Spanish to realize that there are differences here, despite both of them being National Weather Service organizations. Level 1, the SPC uses the word mínimo, while the National Weather Service uses the word marginal. Level 3, Weather Service uses elevado, while the National Weather Service uses aumentado or realzado. And so you can only imagine, if governmental organizations are not agreeing here, how it's going to look like in the broadcast industry. Here's a case study from April 16th of 2019. Anything you see in red here is different than the official SPC translation. And so you have national markets changing the first 3 categories, local markets only changing 2, and then other adjacent local markets not changing anything whatsoever. And this gets even more interesting because we also looked at stations within the same markets, and we found that those words were changed drastically, even from AM to PM programming in the same station. So this goes to show you that this is not at fault to any of these broadcasters. I don't want to point any fingers here. Let me be very clear on that, because they are trying their best with what their perception is of a translation. And that is, of course, influenced by how they were raised, their socioeconomic status, and other factors. But what we have to consider here is creating unifying messages in the Spanish language that no matter whether you're from Costa Rica, Bolivia, or Puerto Rico, you're able to understand that word. And so that's the second half of my focus here today, in creating unifying risk messages that are culturally relevant and make sense to all Spanish speakers. Hey, who best to ask than language experts on how to approach this problem overall? I contacted Dr. John Lipsky, a professor of Spanish in Penn State, and he was teaching a dialectology seminar where they explore all of the varieties of the Spanish language across the world. And so we assigned 12 PhD students on a project that I'll touch base on in a second. But I do want to highlight that these scholars represent various parts of Latin America, Spain, and even some came from the United States. And so for a class project, we introduced what the Storm Prediction Center is, the 5 definitions in English for the risk categories, the ones in Spanish, the weather service ones, how broadcasters are doing it, and we set them out on a mission. And that is the following. By reading the following definitions in the next few slides, how would you define the 5 risk categories, keeping in mind that you must communicate the same level of urgency as done in the English language? And so here's what they found. I want to note that these risk categories have not been implemented by the SPC as of January 2021, but they are being considered. Level 1 is mínimo, 2 bajo, 3 moderado, 4 alto, and 5 extremo. Let's put them side by side with the SPC definitions and explain why the linguistic experts chose some given words over others. For example, level 2, leve, as said by the SPC, was changed to the word bajo. Why is that? Because leve is mainly practiced in Spain. And that makes sense because I'm Peruvian and I did not even know what that word meant. But they proposed the word bajo because all Spanish-speaking countries are able to understand that that means low. They also moved levels 4 and 5 back down to 3 and 4 to make categorical sense in Spanish. And they changed level 5 to the word extremo, which means extreme. They were okay with using that as it makes sure it communicates urgency to Spanish-speaking populations, and they're a lot more comfortable with using that word too. And so I was scrolling through Twitter one of these days, just like, of course, through COVID-19, staying at home. And I saw that they were also doing COVID-related risk categories to encourage people to take action. And goodness, to my surprise, I saw that they were using the same words that the linguistic experts suggested. This goes to show you that the medical experts with established frameworks went ahead and did a similar approach to ours, brought in language experts, and them too created similar risk categories. This goes to show you that when we translate, it should not necessarily just be a direct translation, but one that is relevant to the given community. And that's what I want to end with today, consistency versus relevancy, because translation isn't just something you do directly. You have to consider other things, dialects, cultures, how people view it in general, and create effective risk communication for these communities by making sure that the technical terminology is we agree on one word and embark on an educational campaign, but for the risk terminology to bring in language experts. Why not survey Spanish-speaking populations every year so that if the language continues to evolve, we know exactly on how to approach this problem. This is how we create effective risk communication and save lives, no matter the language barrier present. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time. Once again, this is published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. There's the DOI number provided there for you. We also provide current resources that Your broadcast station, EM office, or weather service forecast office can use present day to expand Spanish language communication. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.